Looking at wind. Wind would be a whole bunch of these 24 or so blue squares around Australia. But looking at only at some on the east coast, you'll see they reach their peak around, they do really well around the middle of the year. There's a whole bunch of different wind generators that you can get. If you're trying to balance a number of wind generators against maintenance, against kilowatt hours per dollar, your sort of best is around here, but people like the bigger models because there's fewer of them. Somewhere around here is where you need to go. And these things are huge. I walked under them. Last year we walked across Spain, 800 kilometres in a month, and they're all across Spain. Spain has enough windmills to supply half of Australia's electricity needs. Half. They've just got them there, everywhere you walk. And there's two different models. There's the fast ones they have in America and we have in Australia for some reason, and there's the slow ones they have in Europe. And you walk underneath them and you hardly hear them. And they're huge. The blades are huge. They're bigger than the wingspan of an Airbus 380. They're absolutely enormous. Here's a person standing on the top of one of these things up there. You can hardly see them. They are enormous, but they're really quiet even when they're running quickly. And once again, we start next January. 10 years later, we've got everything installed. But people are saying, look, they'd cover so much of Australia. Well, have a look at South Australia. Here's South Australia. And this is just one cattle station. That purple area is one cattle station, just one. Mind you, it's the biggest cattle station in the world, but it is just one cattle station. And if we're happy to let somebody have one cattle station, well, the amount of area of it that we'd need to run the solar would be that big, and the wind would be that big, and this is a cattle station. Then you've got to have the electrical grid. At the moment, we do not have much of an electrical grid. There has not been any real investment in infrastructure in Australia ever. And so we've got this sort of grid here, and a bit over here, a bit there, and nothing much. And what we'd have to do would be to add in all this other stuff. I can see red lines going across there, red lines, red lines, red lines, green lines, high voltage AC, high voltage DC. This is all proven technology. Everything I've talked about, the solar, the windmills, the grid, has been built elsewhere in the world and works. And then you say, but I'd love to do renewable, but it just won't give us, baseload power. It will give us baseload power. Looking at the calendar year of 2008, with January to December, middle of the year, green's nasty. This is your solar. Sorry, this is your wind. This is your solar. There's your excess. And over here, you run dangerously close to not having base load. Running it over 2 years, once again, problems with base load in the middle of the year. Let's firstly go to a really good month, and I'll show you a really bad month after that. A really good month is February. Snore, 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 snore. Sun comes up. Shine, 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 shine. Sleep, sleep, sleep. Shine, 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 shine. Sleep. Shine, 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 shine. Sleep. Over here, you've got your wind. There you've got your solar. That's how much we're putting out, and that's the excess that we temporarily, with our technology today, cannot store. Man, we're way ahead. We run into problems for a couple of days in the middle of each year, which we can fix up with biomass and with hydro. I haven't even talked about hot rocks, which is an unproven technology, except in Iceland, where they use it really well. And tidal. Australia. Between Australia and New Guinea, Indonesia, we have 10%, 1/10 of all the tidal energy on the whole planet. And the amount of it that we catch is zero. So we can just skate through these parts and you think, well, why should we put ourselves at risk? Hang in there because of the cost. Then they say we couldn't possibly build it. Okay, well, this is how much iron over here that we would, or steel that we would need over the next 10 years. This is how much we make over the next 10 years, and this is how much we sell overseas for them to turn the dirt into steel, which we then buy back and make them lots of money and we go poor. I don't know why we do that. Oh, and you do the same thing with concrete. We'd be way ahead. 10 years, that's what we need. And the same with silver. You need a lot of silver to cover the mirrors. We've got lots of silver. And aluminium for the transmission. We do need to build 2 glass factories. We've got 1 in Australia. Hey, it's not impossible to build a factory. Then people say, but look, the emissions. You're going to create emissions when you're coming up with this new power source. And they're true. Yes, you will. Here's the emissions from the electric wires, the grid, from wind and from solar. That's how much emissions in millions of tonnes of carbon dioxide you get over the next 10 years. This is how much emissions you get over the next 10 years, and this is by what we get from burning coal, business as usual. So the emissions will be less. And they say, look, we'd love to do it, but we've got 400,000 million coal mining jobs on the Hunter Valley in New South Wales. Don't worry about the fact that the coal mining companies themselves destroyed a lot of jobs by mechanising, and they went from 14,000 down to 5,000. They did that themselves. Will it destroy jobs? Okay, taking the overview, Australia reached its peak as a manufacturing country in 1959, and since then we've been going downhill. We would create new jobs. For making the solar, over the bottom we got ourselves a 10-year window, and up here we're looking at about 80,000 jobs just in the concentrating solar thermal, about 40,000 jobs in the wind, about 5,000 jobs over that 10-year period in the transmission. You need a couple of thousand jobs for the biomass and also for the hydro as well. And then the total number of jobs peaks out to be about 140, which should be added on to the jobs we already have in our community. If you build up a whole bunch of new industries, which then employ more people, you don't turn around and say, okay, we're now going to fire all of the news agents and all of the people who work in petrol stations. No, you just add the jobs on top. So these are the jobs that we already will have over the next 10 years, and these are the extra jobs. You don't fire, and then it's crazy. And then they say, but look, we can't do it because it will bankrupt Australia. And this is really important. It turns out it's cheaper for Australia to go renewable. You need massive infrastructure to keep coal going, and you need massive infrastructure to keep renewables going. And part of the infrastructure with coal is that each power station gets 4 to 6 to 8 to 10 million tonnes of coal shuttling into it. The difference is that you don't have to pay for the sun or the wind. And they've broken it down into all these figures here, and then they've broken them down into subcategories and subcategories and subcategories. And looking at the 30-year window from 2010 to 2040 to supply Australia with all the electricity that we need, totally 100% from renewable sources, would cost us about $700, $800 billion. About $370 billion to set up in the first place, and roughly the same to keep it going for the next 20 years. So for 30 years, we would need $700 or so billion to supply Australia with electricity from renewables, and running on coal, it would cost us 3 times as much. It's actually cheaper for us not to have to pay for the fuel. Gee, sounds so obvious. Amazing. So it's cheaper for Australia to go renewables. Electricity will drop in price once we get the system going, once we get the economies of scale in there. But then people say, oh no, look, $37 billion in one hit per year. I mean, you're looking at $370 billion over 10 years per year. That's way too much. And comparing it as a percentage of our gross domestic product, well, blow me down. It's actually less than we spend on running shoes and Lycra bike shorts. It's almost the same as we spend as investments on gas and coal and uranium. And if this is Australia's gross national product for the year 2009, that's how much we would need. But then you say, but it's too much in one point. And I mean, look, think about the poor mining companies. Now, I know the mining companies. Every Saturday you see BHP out there at the local primary school organising a Lamington sale because they're broke and they can't afford to pay tax. But they managed to find $40 billion in their back pocket to try and take over a company called Potash in Canada. No trouble at all. Can't afford to pay tax. And then if you read the Financial Review of last month on the 13th, they're talking about the float of Queensland Rail, QR National Float, and there's a picture here of, see all those different colours? That's all new stuff they're going to put in there. And they have a wonderful sentence. Miners do not have to wait for upgrades. And if you read all of the little numbers there, like 5 billion and 7 billion, and add them all up, the Queensland government is throwing 16 point something billion dollars into the float to make it happen, so they can sell off their infrastructure, which the citizens of Queensland actually own. And I said the word infrastructure. If you have, I mean, you must have driven across the Sydney Harbour Bridge. Did we in 2010 build the Sydney Harbour Bridge? Nope. Did our parents build it in 1985? Nope. Did our grandparents build it in 1960? Nope. Did our great-grandparents build it in 1935? No. The Sydney Harbour Bridge was built by people before our great-grandparents from 1925 to 1932, back when Sydney had 2 cars. Okay, it didn't. I lied about that a little bit. But it's got 8 lanes for cars, 2 lanes for trains, and 2 lanes for pedestrians and bicycles. And it's still serving us today. As an example of a politician who can think into the future, who could think, I'll be running a video in just a minute, which has got a soundtrack. I'll show this video of a politician who came up with a plan to do something that he could not personally benefit from. He would not be in power when it came to fruition. He would not be able to open it. It was not shovel ready. It wasn't $1,000 to everybody to buy a plasma. It was something for the future.
We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills.
Because that goal will serve to measure and organise the best of our energies and skills for the future, for infrastructure, for the future, for our children and their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren on into the future. Going green makes economic sense. I can't see any argument against it except that it upsets the apple cart for business as usual. Now, everything I've talked about over the last 48 minutes has been totally 100% true. And if it hasn't been 100% true, it should be. And if it shouldn't be, it doesn't matter, because under the Goods and Services Act, Section 165(55), I'm not actually here. Thank you.
And Dr. Karl has indicated that he'll be staying around for a while during the next session. So those of you that didn't manage to get your question in this forum, you might be able to ask that on a one-to-one. So, and I do encourage you to stay for the next session. This is where I guess there's a bit of quid pro quo. I mean, we've had a great talk here from Dr. Karl, and now I guess you've got to earn a bit of the your keep here tonight. So, the next session is where you can further consider the topic of environment and join the conversation or post comments on the comment boards on the focus areas for the future. Okay, I'd like everyone to thank Dr. Karl for coming tonight.